to Tiny Desk Worship for First Church and Parish in Dedham. I'm the Reverend Rali Weaver, and I'm so glad you're with us. I hope you decided to join us for our Zoom worship. All the links for Zoom worship and also for the YouTube video of our worship are available on our website at dedhamuu.org. We'll begin with our centering thought this Sunday, March 7th, 2021, a quote from Ulysses S. Grant. "It was my fortune or misfortune to be called to the office of chief executive without any previous political training." I invite you to relax into our prelude, Minuet in C major by Ludwig van Beethoven, performed by Derry Dolsall. Hi, it's so good to be together for worship, and I hope that you know that we will hopefully be back together in September for the first Sunday, the Sunday after Labor Day, in our meeting house. In the meantime, please continue to watch your all-church email and our website and our Facebook page to know when we will have gatherings in person. As the weather warms and the ground gets more solid, we can gather again on the green in the spring, and then hopefully have a few times, including maybe an Easter egg hunt this year on the green together. We also have a daily meditation and check-in from 9 to 9:30 on Zoom, as well as a writer's workshop that takes place every other week, and a once monthly Dismantling White Supremacy book group. All the links for these and the Nature and Nurture Society walk, which will begin again as the weather gets warmer, are on our website and are in our all-church email. So please watch those places for the information. We will now begin our morning worship with our introit patriotic song by Edward Grieg, performed by Derry Dolsall. opening words are a poem that Ulysses S. Grant wrote to his Aunt Mary King during his time at West Point, titled My Country. My country calls and I obey, and shortly I'll be on my way, removed from home, far in the west, yet you with home and friends are blessed. Kindly then remember me, I'll also often think of thee, nor forget the soldier's story, gone to gain the field of glory. Let's sing together hymn number 9, No Longer Forward Nor Behind. I light our chalice today for all the places and persons caught up in political and religious unrest. All through the world, we see people fighting for change and also fighting for things to stay the same. And we pray that things can come to a more moderate and complete understanding without people getting hurt. I also light our green sanctuary candle for all the ways we strive to be a more sustainable congregation. Please unmute yourself if you're with me in Zoom worship so we can stay together our unison affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, to serve humanity in love is our covenant with each other and with God. And now you may mute yourself again. We'll have our centering time, and then Grace will read to you our intergenerational message. So please bring this sound into your heart and your mind and your spirit so you can open your listening ears.
Hi everyone, I'm here to read the intergenerational story, which is this book, Vote for Our Future, by Margaret McNamara and Micah Player. As I hope all the kids remember, our fifth principle has to do with the right to vote. Just as our principles talk about how everyone is important and how everyone should be treated fairly and kindly, we also believe that everyone has the right to vote, and to vote about things that are important to them. And that's what this book is going to tell us about. Every 2 years, on the Tuesday after the first Monday of November, Stanton Elementary School closes for the day. For repairs? For a holiday? For vacation? No way. Stanton Elementary School closes for Election Day and changes from a school to a polling station. What is a polling station? Polling station is where people vote. Just like this picture, it usually happens in the gymnasium or the auditorium of schools. The reason people vote is to choose who makes the laws of the country. We should all vote, said LaToya. We should all vote to make the future better. We can't vote until we turn 18, said Lizzie. So what can we do? The kids of Stanton Elementary School did their research. They went online and found all kinds of information. They looked in books and made notes. They even took a trip to their local election office and picked up forms. I can't wait until I can vote for real, said Amal. Me either, said everybody else. Kids have to live with adult choices. The kids of Stanton Elementary School were ready to spread the word. Katie and her mom made flyers and handed them out. Don't forget to vote, Katie said to one busy dad. I didn't even know there was an election, he said. Now you do, said Katie. Can I go with you to vote? Jasmine asked her big sister. It's a pain to vote, her sister said. I'm not even registered, added her friend. It's not hard to register, said Jasmine. You can do it together and I can show you how. Nadia and her auntie went door to door. Voting is a right, Nadia said. A right that women didn't have 100 years ago. One lady told them, I don't like standing in lines. I don't like standing in lines either, answered Nadia's auntie. But if we stand in line for coffee or for a movie or at a bank, I bet we can stand in line to vote, said Nadia. Said the lady. Maybe we can. At Jaden's house, the whole family was making their voting plans. Jaden's dad was voting before work. Jaden's mom was voting after work. I've walked to that polling station every election since I could vote, Jaden's great-grand told him. But I can't walk anymore. I can't walk so far anymore. A volunteer can drive you, said Jaden. Let's get you set up, said Jaden's mom. Mia and Noah and Jamal had a bake sale. Don't forget to vote, Mia said, as she handed out change. I'll be away on election day, said one woman. In our state, you can vote early, said Mia. Or you can vote by mail, said Jamal. The voter guide tells you how. Voting, what's the big deal? Asked a teenager. People fought wars so we can vote, said Mia. That's a big deal. Why should I vote? said a sad lady. Nothing ever changes. Besides, one vote won't make a difference. Every vote counts. Are you kidding? Said Jamal. Changes are made every day because people voted. By the time it was the first Tuesday after the first Monday of November, every kid at Stanton Elementary School had spread the word to their families, to their neighbors, to friends, to strangers, to friends of strangers. The whole town had a voting plan, and on election day, I'm not quite sure where this goes. Voters came early in the morning before the sun was up. They waited in line with coffee. They voted for the first time and for the 50th time. They rolled in on wheelchairs. They ran in at the last minute. They came with their sons and daughters, their nieces and nephews, their brothers and sisters, their cousins and friends. And on election day, on the first Wednesday after the first Monday of November, all the votes had been counted. The results were so close, the votes had to be counted again. Some people won and some people lost. The laws of the country began to change. Staten Elementary School went back to being a school. And the future began to change. So remember, some people think it's not fun to stand in line to vote, but it is very important that we vote. Very important. And every single one of our votes is as important as the next.
I invite you now into a time of prayer or meditation. As is your practice, we will begin with the meditation on breathing performed by our First Church Choir, written by Sarah Dan Jones and mixed by our music director, Derry Dolezal. We'll begin by breathing in peace and breathing out love. Take a deep breath in, peace, and breathe out love. Let us be grateful for all the silences in our lives, for with them we may more completely experience sound.
Our first reading is from Personal Memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant. There is little doubt in my mind now that the prevailing sentiment of the South would have been opposed to secession in 1860 and 1861 if there had been a fair and calm expression of opinion, unbiased by threats, and if the ballot of one legal voter had counted for as much as that of any other. But there was no calm discussion of the question. Demagogues who were too old to enter the army if there should be a war, others who entertained so high an opinion of their own ability that they did not believe they could be spared from the direction of the affairs of state in such an event, declaimed vehemently and unceasingly against the North, against its aggressions upon the South, its interference with Southern rights, etc., etc. They denounced the Northerners as cowards, poltroons, Negro worshippers, claimed that one Southern man was equal to 5 Northern men in battle, that if the South would stand up for its rights, the North would back down. Mr. Jefferson Davis said in a speech delivered at LaGrange, Mississippi, before the secession of that state, that he would agree to drink all the blood spilled south of the Mason-Dixon line if there should be a war. The young men who would have the fighting to do in case of war believed all these statements, both in regard to the aggressiveness of the North and its cowardice. They too cried out for a separation from such people. The great bulk of the legal voters of the South were men who owned no slaves. Their homes were generally in the hills and poor country. Their facilities for educating their children, even up to the point of reading and writing, were very limited. Their interest in the contest was very meager. What there was, if they had been capable of seeing it, was with the North. They too needed emancipation. Under the old regime, they were looked down upon by those who controlled all the affairs in the interest of slave owners as poor white trash who were allowed the ballot so long as they cast it according to the direction. I'm aware that this last statement may be disputed, and individual testimony perhaps adduced to show that in antebellum days the ballot was as untrammeled in the South as in any section of the country, but in the face of any such contradiction, I reassert the statement. The shotgun was not resorted to. Masked men did not ride over the country at night intimidating voters, but there was a firm feeling that a class existed in every state with a sort of divine right to control public affairs. If they could not get this control by one means, they must by another. The end justified the means. The coercion, if mild, was complete. There were 2 political parties, it is true, in all the states, both strong in numbers and respectability, but both equally loyal to the institution which stood paramount in Southern eyes to all other institutions in state or nation. The slave owners were the minority, but governed both parties. Had politics ever divided the slaveholders and the non-slaveholders, the majority would have been obliged to yield, or internecine war would have been the consequence. I do not know that the Southern people were to blame for this condition of affairs. There was a time when slavery was not profitable, and the discussion of the merits of the institution was confined almost exclusively to the territory where it existed. The states of Virginia and Kentucky came near abolishing slavery by their own acts, one state defeating the measure by a tie vote and the other only lacking 1. But when the institution became profitable, all talk of its abolition ceased where it existed. And naturally, as human nature is constituted, arguments were adduced in its support. Please relax and enjoy our anthem, Sarabande from Suite in G Major by J.S. Bach.
Thank you.
Our second reading comes from Ulysses S. Grant, 100 Years Later, by John Wise Simon. Grant avoided politics during the war both because of his concept of military propriety and his genuine dislike for politics. In Washington, after the war, he settled comfortably into the role of commanding a diminished army, enjoyed a stable family life, and anticipated lifetime employment. President Andrew Johnson, eager to associate Grant's personal popularity with a conciliatory Reconstruction policy, put such improper pressure on him that Grant eventually came to believe that his duty lay in accepting the Republican presidential nomination. Quote, "I have been forced into it in spite of myself," he wrote to Sherman, a man to whom Grant thought he owed an explanation. "I did not want the presidency," Grant recalled, "and have never quite forgiven myself for resigning the command of the army to accept it." As president, he served 2 terms without ever becoming a politician and did not deliver his first campaign speech until 1880, 3 years after leaving the White House. If Grant believed that success as an unmilitary general presaged success as an unpolitical president, he was doomed to disappointment. He had become a general after 15 years in the Army. He entered the White House without adequately understanding the mechanics of its power, relying upon his own reforming instincts. The American people, however, showed more enthusiasm for electing than for sustaining a determined non-politician. Grant's reform efforts met frustration in his first term when Southern white intransigence blocked full civil rights for blacks, congressional opposition crippled civil service reform, and religious bickering hindered implementation of a peace policy in Indian affairs. Still, Grant deserved credit for trying. If Grant had served only 1 term as president, he might now be remembered for the successes of his administration. His support of Reconstruction laws upholding civil rights, his assistance in securing passage of the 15th Amendment guaranteeing the right to vote, his generosity in granting amnesty to former Confederates, his reform initiatives in civil service and Indian affairs, and his peaceful settlement of grievances with England through the Treaty of Washington. Only his persistence in attempting to annex Santo Domingo and his brother-in-law's involvement in the Black Friday scheme to corner the gold market clouded an otherwise creditable record. When impatient reformers, denouncing what they labeled Grantism and calling themselves liberal Republicans, joined with Democrats in 1872 to oppose Grant's election to a second term, they made the president the central target of their campaign, but drew no response from the White House. Embarrassed by acclaim, passive in response to criticism, Grant seemingly valued his privacy more highly than his reputation. In that, he maintained a lifelong practice. Please join in singing hymn number 150 in the Gray Hymnal, hymn number 150, All Whose Boast It Is.
I think if Ulysses S. Grant had wanted to be president, if he had felt an undeniable compulsion for Reconstruction after the war, if he had half the oratory skills of Lincoln, our country would be in a different place right now. I may be oversimplifying, as I often do in sermons, yet for all his imperfections, Ulysses S. Grant attempted to bring our still very young country through one of the most intense and fraught times in our U.S. history. You're not wrong. President Andrew Johnson served before Grant and deserves a nod for stepping in after Lincoln's assassination. However, one could argue that he did more harm than good. He clearly was not for true Reconstruction, and he clearly did allow Southern states to return to their black codes. And he opposed the 14th Amendment, which made all persons born or naturalized in America to be citizens of these United States with all the rights and citizenship therein. It is no wonder that President Johnson, a former slaveholder himself, supported the black codes, which restricted the lives of formerly enslaved workforce to guarantee cheap labor to the South. It wasn't as if Johnson had invented the voodoo politics of the Southern states, yet he surely was complicit in its continuation after the Civil War. A Tennessee Democrat who joined Lincoln on the 1864 re-election ticket, Johnson was considered a Democrat brontosaurus who could ensure Southern congressional support for the continuation of the war. When Johnson took the oath of office after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, he promised swift punishment of the rebel army, but instead killed some and then set up a military-style tribunal for the others, and then turned a blind eye to the rest, including undoing much of the 40 acres and a mule efforts of restitution to the formerly enslaved. Imagine how differently the race situation in the United States might have been if Johnson had never come to power. Despite the fact that Ulysses S. Grant had promised President Lincoln he would never run for office, he was encouraged to run in opposition to Johnson because after Lincoln's death, the Johnson administration had veered so far from protecting the rights of the previously enslaved. Ulysses S. Grant was not in any way an outright abolitionist. However, he was the general who won the war for the Union by holding black soldiers as equal to whites in fighting. Grant was also reported to have freed his only slave before the Civil War started, making him more sympathetic to the rights of black Americans, even if not avowedly so. Ulysses S. Grant was a bit of an enigma to some and a mystery to others. As our reading points out, he rarely spoke on his own behalf or even that of his party. If it weren't for his actions as general and later as president, we would never know his true positions on anything. For example, in his first weeks in office, he was confronted by domestic terrorism of the Ku Klux Klan and swiftly used the executive branch of government to ensure the safe and swift confirmation of the 14th and then later 15th Amendments. Without 6 years of solid and constant opposition by the federal government during Grant's administration, the Ku Klux Klan would have run rampant throughout the South, terrorizing black people and abolitionists and denying voting rights. There are countless biographers of Grant's life who focused primarily on his alcoholism or his family members' financial malfeasance. More recently, though, Grant's efforts during the presidency to unify the states and to stand up to domestic terrorism have been lauded in the face of our own present-day national racist divides and rise of domestic terrorism. I would like to highlight in this analysis of the historical facts that Grant was more of a parlor general after the Civil War and never a true politician. When contrasting the two men, you can easily see how Ulysses S. Grant intuited his path forward, while Abraham Lincoln took an almost theological approach to leadership. While Grant is truly the lesser known of the two presidents, in part because of his mere refusal to promote or record his presidential life, what is important to realize here is that whether working from our intuition, drawn from deeply felt convictions, or from carefully predetermined philosophy, it is possible to effect change. Permanent, never to be reversed change may never be possible. However, to make progress in a democracy, as our Constitution prescribes, requires both methodical, moderate determination and intuitive, creative innovation and progress. I recently attended a training for the leadership of the UU Ministers Association. As some of you know, I have been the hospitality coordinator for the Mass Bay District chapter of the UUMA for more than a decade. Hospitality coordinator was the position I sort of fell into as the previous hospitality coordinator left the district mid-term, in part due to its size and the number of serving retired community and interning ministers in our district. The Mass Bay districts have never been known to be very welcoming or hospitable. For the last decade or more, I have tried to change that with kindness, generosity, and plenty of good food with some effect. In fact, I think I was employing a very Southern female sort of leadership, an approach I learned from my Southern family, i.e. using food served with a smile to make people feel at home, when in fact, I have many more gifts than just smiling and making people feel at home and their taste buds happy. Due to the pandemic, though, my usual methods have been thwarted. Not only that, but our virtual gatherings have made it very difficult to recruit new leadership. If I'm honest, I have wanted to stop being on so many committees and serving so many organizations outside of this church for a long time, both because over the years I've said yes to too many things, and also because in light of the pandemic, I felt overwhelmed by the fact that I cannot effect enough change in the volunteer positions that I hold. I had said as much to the higher MBD, Mass Bay District UUMA leadership team over the several years, only they've never been able to find a replacement for me as the hospitality coordinator. Then, when they started looking for a new president, a new vice president, a new secretary, a new treasurer, and a new hospitality coordinator, I started to feel increasingly daunted by the fact that our UUMA Mass Bay District might stay the same unwelcoming place without consistent leadership or vision for change. At the UUMA training for leadership in districts, they said they are trying to incorporate some of the learnings from the Commission on Institutional Change, which I hope we as a congregation will also look at. It's titled Widening Our Circle of Concern. They encouraged us to think outside of the box and not be stuck in formal institutional forms of leadership, and to even consider dismantling traditional views of membership and membership dues in order to become more welcoming. Suddenly, the whole idea of leadership in the UUMA Mass Bay District changed for me. I wanted to do more than just arrange the food. This was a very emotional decision for me. It felt less daunting and more full of possibilities for change. And it started me thinking that leaving behind some of the old institutional ways of leadership and membership might even make our UUMA chapter more welcoming and hospitable. In the end, I signed up for one more year to be part of the leadership transition team, recognizing both that I care enough about the end goals and that I have a useful skill set and leadership style that might prove helpful. There are times when we believe in the cause that we need to step into leadership, and there are times when we find ourselves in a particular role by happenstance. No matter how we got there, we need to use both our principles and our intuition to affect the most progress that we can in our given situations. What changes do you feel you need to make in your communities? What can you do in your current situation that will impact the greater good? What roles might you seek to fill in order to make your desired community changes real? The time for politicking and private promotion have passed. Instead, we need to all work together to effect change and build the world we want to live in. Titles and politics and slogans and propaganda of all sorts are at odds with the true transformation and long-lasting change that is needed in this time. So let us plan like Lincoln, but plod and prod and persist like Grant, in the hope that we too can quell the domestic terrorism built on racist ideals in our times, as they work to do in their time. I invite you to join with me in singing hymn number 182, "Oh, the Beauty of a Life." And now let us fix our steps, so we stagger not in the uneven motions of this world, but go steadily on our way, neither censuring our journeys by the weather we meet or turning aside from anything that might befall us. But choose life, choose life, choose life. Oh, that was last week.
May the blessings of love rest upon you. May peace abide with you. May God's presence illuminate your heart now and
And please join me for Zoom Social Hour.